we got something fun today. This is the Slate Case AQ, and whether you think this is an NR200 that wants to be a meshlicious or just a pudgy meshlicious, let's take a quick peek here at the features and measurements before I build it up and test it out. Welcome to Machines and More. This one's going to be fun. We have the Slate Case AQ in the house, ready to be built up, and I couldn't wait to show you guys the features. So consider this part one of what will be a multi-part review here, and in the later video I'll show you the test build, the other configuration with the traditional bracket, and also the performance benchmark. So quick disclaimer, this case was graciously provided by Protolyth, the company that makes these, and I'm not being compensated for this review, and that's the same that goes for all the review content that you'll see here on this channel. And a big thanks to Protolyth for giving me the opportunity to check out this bad boy and show this to all of you. So this one, it's an early pre-production review sample. It's not in the final form quite yet. So some of those materials and specs that we're discussing here, they're going to be a little bit different in the final retail version. And while I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, it's going to be fairly similar to this, as I've been told. And hopefully later on when it formally launches, we can revisit the case then. The one difference to keep in mind is that I've been told this particular iteration is 2.5 millimeters shallower. So if there is a particular rad combo you're interested in, just know that you have a little leeway compared to what I'll be showing you today. The other thing is this case, it has already been used for testing and validation by the company, so it does show a little bit of surface wear. So as far as the out-of-the-box finish quality, I won't be able to provide you a complete evaluation just yet, but you know, it's pretty high quality. Let's start with the basics first. The Slate Case AQ, it is an SFF case, a bona fide SFF case, and it squeezes in just under that arbitrary threshold that is 20 liters. It's spec'd at about 19.7 liters or so, so there's more volume here than your Cooler Master under 200, your Meshlicious. Certainly this isn't a big mini-itx case, but you know, its default configuration is sandwich style, and in that category it's going to definitely be on the bigger end of that spectrum, although it's not strictly a sandwich style layout. I measure 373 millimeters tall without the feet, 179 millimeters wide, and 293 millimeters deep. So we're pretty close here because that works out to be 19.6 liters or so. The panels attach magnetically. These are magnetic catches on the core of the case, and they're very strong, so you're going to have to be very gentle with the glass panel when you're placing it in. Of course, the glass panel is an option. You can choose, at least from the pre-orders right now, you can choose a perforated one on both sides, or you can choose the perforated and a solid metal panel, or the perforated and the tempered glass panel. But these are really substantial 3mm panels and quite beefy. This is T6 6061 aluminum here. Now there is a use case for having this extra volume, and it's not necessarily going to go to waste if you could use it, because there's full compatibility for two 280mm radiators here, and that's going to be a lot more than your typical sandwich style case. Now I've done a modified NR200 with top and bottom 240s, but this one, it's right out of the box compatible with two 280s. Now you can choose how much rad space you want. So this center core of the case, it rides on sliding dovetail rails. These rails that you see here, they're not the final material just yet. This is a prototyping material, and that final material will be made out of ABS plastic. If you want a thicker rad on this side, a thinner rad on this side, you can do that. You have essentially 100 millimeters to allocate to that. You just slide it, the center core according to your preference, and then you tighten it down with the thumb screws that are on the other side of the rails. So the center core will hold your motherboard, your power supply, and on the other side, your graphics card. As far as the motherboard goes, it's a little bit odd because the rear I/O end, it does face the bottom of the case, so that just about makes it inaccessible unless you like pivoting your case up and down when you're plugging things in or taking things out. Of course, there is some room to do that. The assembly here, it's offset from the bottom by about 50 millimeters if you include the rubber feet. So that is probably the single biggest compromise here with this layout. The front I/O panel, it's just the USB-C front header plus the front panel audio, and I really love this power switch. Sound familiar? cherry MX green, so really cool. You do also have a pair of rear USB-A headers at the back of the case, so that will alleviate some of your I/O woes here. But yeah, even if your USB needs are met, Ethernet, rear audio, you know, there's going to be some things that you're going to have to work around as well. But with this layout, you do gain a generous amount of rad space for an ITX case. The pre-production one here has total clearance that measures in about 98 millimeters. So for example, if you're after a custom loop build, I've always wanted to try this bad boy over here, you could run one super rad and super fan combo like this 54 millimeter Corsair XR7 and the mighty Fantex T30s. And for my measurements, I had 16 millimeters left over, so you're in the final retail version, you should be able to even squeeze in slim case fans on the other end. Or if you wanted to run just two TX240s plus 25 millimeter fans, you can do that. In fact, you could switch out one of those rads. You could have a TX240 and then a 30 millimeter rad with 25 millimeter fans, and you should be totally fine. So that's just one of the examples. For those of you that aren't interested in a custom loop, this type of setup will allow you to position a GPU hybrid card along with an AIO for your CPU. You'll most likely have to swap out one set of those rad fans for slim fans, but that's going to be a workable configuration as well, and that type of allowable setup is something you really don't see too often in the SFF space. In the standard sandwich setup, you can have 80-ish millimeters of CPU clearance, which is really decent for this sandwich form factor, and it's well suited to your larger, low-profile cooler setups. With this configuration, also the official GPU spec is 3 slots, but there's only 2 cutouts at the bottom if you go that route. So it's not truly 3 slots, you know, GPU terminology, it's all over the place now. Colloquially, we'll refer to these as 2.5 slot cards, so your bigger card shrouds, but they still only take up 2 expansion slots. Those cards will work in that configuration. For example, this 6900 XT from Gigabyte, this gaming OC, it just about fits. It does angle in slightly at the top, but I think this 56 millimeter card is close to max for configuration 1. Now if you reposition the divider, you can add a slot to the thickness, and actually if you're doing a custom loop, this is the configuration I'd be looking into, since that will give you a bit more flexibility for your GPU block and a pump res where you'd possibly have to overlap a flat res and the block. But either way, your card will connect to your motherboard via an included riser cable. Unfortunately, it looks like this one is still only a Gen 3 cable, which will introduce some headaches for most builders with modern components, but it looks like they are working on the 4.0 option, but just keep that one in mind. And also the bottom facing IO on the GPU side, yeah, that's going to be an issue too, but at least that's easy to work around because you've got this right angle cable, something you've seen like in the meshlicious as well. And from what I understand, this is going to be included, and it's a nice one because this is a DisplayPort adapter here. So in that more spacious GPU mode, with the so-called 4-slot spacing, you can also use these included 17 millimeter or so standoffs to space, or you basically reconfigure the riser cable towards the outer case panel, and then that frees up the center slot for cable management. Or if you have a flow-through cooler, that'll help tremendously there, kind of like the mod we looked at with the meshlicious. On the PSU side, you have compatibility for SFX, like I have here. This is the FSP Dagger 850. Or you can also use an SFX-L power supply. You can orient that power supply either direction, so cables can face either rad panel. So it does really give you the freedom on how you want to cable manage. And on the other side of this power supply, you do have, well, GPU dependent, you can place this multi-purpose bracket that'll slide in this other dovetail here, and this will help you secure either a pump. You've got all these cutouts for modern pump holes, and or you can use this for 5 2.5-inch SSDs. Great if you're a storage geek or doing some little type of workstation here, or a 3.5-inch HDD. So it is dependent though. It's like something with this big tall GPU, this is not going to work. So that's it for the sandwich mode. The other neat feature of this case that I'll cover that perhaps will be of some interest to you will be this traditional layout mode, which doesn't involve a riser cable. It's going to be kind of like just a vertically turned NR200 in that sense. It does look like this bracket is an add-on purchase, and while you can still do an AIO with this setup, that will allow you to also additionally have the option to run a CPU cooler with up to 137 millimeters of clearance. So you can do something like the Thermalright SS135, Noctua U9S, or fan underneath Noctua C14S type of build. I feel like you're not making the most of the volume here though, because the big feature here for this case is the RAD compatibility, but hey, it is an option nonetheless. But I will show you that because I'm actually planning on building with this first and testing it out, so I'll show you how that looks when I actually do the build here. Overall, you can tell a lot of thought was given here to make this rad spacing work. Like, this is the kind of headline highlight feature here, and obviously that concession has to be the rear IO orientation. Of course, that could have been solved by turning the case horizontally, but it is what it is, and that's just something you're going to have to accept with this design. I'll reserve some additional thoughts until I have it fully built and use it for a little bit, but I am told the materials, the manufacturing is being done internationally from various sources, but they are assembling it and doing the QC stateside in the US, and the material quality is actually quite substantial, and I'm quite impressed with it. But unlike the Phanteks Shift XT, which had the modularity for the exterior of the case, this one has it on the inside, and I think this is a much more interesting idea here because the footprint, it's not bad, but it allows the user to make the most out of however they want to build it. So unfortunately, this is going to be a small batch type of SFF production quantity, so there's no hiding it. This price, from what I saw, it's premium, and $325 is the going pre-order price. So I do think you're going to have to really want this type of RAD compatibility. Obviously, you know what your build needs and aspirations are, but yeah, at this pricing level, I think most users will have to carefully consider, and at least from what I'm seeing so far, you're gonna have to want to take full advantage of that rad spacing and do the build up as a sandwich style case. But I will test both and we'll compare it against its peers in the SFF space. So I do hope you enjoy this quick peek of more feedback, and do expect a full eval when I finish the build. Please like, subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for checking in today.